In 2018, a Newsnight investigation revealed that 3 people who worked for John Bercow, the then Speaker of the House of Commons, had complained about repeated bullying and verbal abuse, something he strenuously denied at the time. Well, today, the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards vindicated the complainers after an early investigation was blocked by a small number of MPs. Catherine Stone found him to have acted as a serial liar and a serial bully. She said he displayed threatening conduct towards staff, including verbal abuse and displays of anger. We now know, too, that after John Bercow appealed her report, the independent expert panel held up all 21 findings. He's the first Speaker of the House of Commons in modern history to be blocked for a peerage and is now banned from holding a Commons pass. Bercow, a Conservative MP for 22 years, jumped ship to Labour last year, and now his membership of the Labour Party has been suspended. Here's our political editor, Nick Watt.
Order! Order! Chuntering from a sedentary position is not helpful.
A combative and controversial figure, often spoiling for a fight. A speaker who belittled critics in public, and behind closed doors, a bully.
It seemed to be over-the-top anger. I'm not sure he was completely in control.
Allegations first aired 4 years ago on Newsnight, which led to the core finding today by an independent expert panel, which concluded that John Bercow was a serial bully. Like many bullies, it added, he had those whom he favoured and those whom he made victims. The panel also found that in his evidence to various inquiries, the former Speaker was a serial liar. Today's report endorsed the separate conclusions of the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner, who upheld 21 complaints against John Bercow by 3 members of his staff. Angus Sinclair, his first private secretary, Lord Lisvane, the most senior House of Commons official, and Kate Ems, the Speaker's second private secretary. Angus Sinclair spoke to Newsnight 4 years ago for the report, which prompted the inquiry.
Suddenly his mobile phone, which he'd been holding, was flung on the desk in front of me, and it broke into a lot of bits. And it was a pretty dramatic moment. Then he left the office shortly afterwards.
John Bercow rejected today's findings, saying, "The case against me would have been thrown out by any court in the land, since it's based on the flimsiest of evidence and advanced by old-school dogmatists." And tonight, he was fighting to clear his name.
John Bercow, any word for Newsnight about tonight's report,
Thank you.
which does accuse you of serial bullying? Well, there we go. John Bercow off to do another interview, this time with LBC. He's been doing a lot of interviews today, but interestingly, not very keen to talk to Newsnight, which of course did air those original bullying allegations.
It was just unbelievable, yeah.
A former leader of the House of Commons, who found herself at the wrong end of John Bercow's temper, welcomed the report.
But if you look back at some of the kind of criticisms, banter, which if it was in a playground you would say was bullying, then you can clearly see in plain sight that there was bullying going on in the chamber. But actually for me it was outside the chamber. It was the way that he spoke to his staff, the senior clerks, particularly the junior clerks, and it was the way he would keep people waiting and shouting at them, and just some of the incidents that I saw and heard were completely unacceptable. And I used to find my own ways to kind of fight back in some small way.
A former Commons official who spoke up in the Newsnight report 4 years ago believes that Westminster has fostered bullies.
I'm afraid there's a wider cultural problem in Parliament, which is exacerbated by the power dynamic that exists between MPs and staff, between elected members and appointed staff. And I'm afraid that at the top of the tree, for the Speaker, who is the most powerful person in Parliament, that dynamic is just reinforced. So I think John Bercow's natural personality may have played part of this, but actually he was also operating in a very unhealthy atmosphere.
A defining moment for Westminster as it confronts uncomfortable allegations from its very recent past. The challenge now is to show the culture is changing.
Nick, well, I'm joined now by Lieutenant General David Leakey, the former Black Rod, who was a fourth complainant and a witness to one of the complaints. Good evening to you. I understand you bumped into John Bercow today. What happened?
He appeared to be very convivial, very bright and breezy to start with, and then said something pretty unpleasant to me, and he was quite clearly, viscerally angry.
Can you tell me what he said?
No.
Simply because it was so awful?
Yes.
So, tell me, he says, of course, that it's a kangaroo court. This is all about the fact that he was a reformer. What do you make of the clarity of this report today? Serial bully, serial liar.
Well, starting with John Bercow's rejection of the panel and its findings, this is typical of John Bercow. If he disagrees with a view, a point of view, or somebody's decision or recommendation, he will say so in spades, and usually in pretty severe language. And it demonstrates, and particularly if you look at his statement, the tone of his language, the language he uses, it is absolutely disrespectful. It's not disrespectful, it's insulting of some of those parts of the British establishment, which he despises, which we should respect. For example, a former appeal court judge.
In Nick Watt's report there, the words were used that really Westminster fosters bullies. And I wonder if there were a number of other people that just were complicit in it, just didn't do anything about it because it was easier not to.
Well, I think there were two groups of people. One was John Bercow. He has said that this was a kangaroo court. You've just made that point. John Bercow has no one to blame but himself for the fact that there was a kangaroo court. He had 11 years as the chairman of the commission in which to put in place a proper process, and he didn't. So he can't complain now about a kangaroo court. He had 11 years to put in place a process which had been recommended by internal reports, external advisors, and so on.
But just to, is this an atmosphere that fosters bullies? That's indeed what was in Nick Watt's report.
Yes, because in a way it is. MPs are elected, peers are appointed into Parliament and feel a sense of entitlement, which is to some extent completely justified. They are entitled to be heard and respected because they've been elected, and that's what they're there for. But as in any leadership post, you have to demonstrate some other human qualities, and one of those is a bit of humility and a bit of kindness, and Bercow didn't.
And Andrea Leadsom there claims that she was one of the ones that got the rough end of the stick.
Andrea Leadsom was one of the leaders of the House of Commons, I think for 2 years or more, and she presided over the leadership of the House of Commons, just as John Bercow was chair of the Commission of the House of Commons, and yet still a proper process was not implemented or put in under her tenure. The leadership, the political leadership in the House was lacking, in my view.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I'm afraid that's all we have time for. I'll be back again tomorrow. Until then, from all of us here, good night.